A homeless woman feeding a hungry cat. A simple act of kindness that would change her life forever. Who could have imagined this small moment of compassion would lead her to the grand halls of a royal palace? In a world where hope often seems lost, this remarkable journey proves that kindness can open doors we never knew existed. What happens next will show you how one selfless act can transform a life of despair into an extraordinary tale of redemption. In the heart of a bustling city, where skyscrapers cast long shadows over forgotten alleys, we find Sarah. Once a woman with dreams and ambitions, now she navigates the harsh reality of homelessness, her possessions reduced to what fits in a weathered backpack. The city continues its relentless pace around her. A symphony of car horns, hurried footsteps, and casual conversations that drift past her like echoes from another world. A world she once belonged to, but now observes from the margins. Each morning, Sarah wakes to the same crushing weight, the knowledge that today will be another battle for survival. The biting cold seeps through her thin jacket as passers-by avert their eyes, treating her as if she were invisible. Some days, she positions herself near the entrance of a busy coffee shop, hoping for spare change or leftover food. Other days, she wanders through public parks, searching for a quiet bench where she might rest undisturbed. "Just make it through today," she whispers to herself, a mantra that grows harder to believe with each passing week. But what Sarah doesn't realize is that her spirit is dangerously close to breaking completely. Her past life feels like a distant dream. The small apartment she once called home, the job she lost during company-wide layoffs, the friends who gradually drifted away as her circumstances deteriorated. Now, her days blur together in a monotonous struggle for the basics: food, shelter, and the simple dignity that society often denies to those living on its streets. The rejection stings most on rainy days, when shopkeepers shoo her away from their doorways, or when security guards escort her from public buildings where she only sought momentary warmth. Then, on what seems like just another merciless day, when the autumn wind carries the first hint of winter's approach and Sarah's stomach aches with familiar hunger, a faint sound catches her attention. At first, she thinks it might be her imagination, but the soft mewing persists, drawing her toward a narrow gap between two buildings. Following the noise down an alley strewn with discarded takeout containers and forgotten newspapers, Sarah discovers a small, trembling cat. Its ribs visible through matted fur, eyes wide with hunger and distrust. The animal backs away slightly as Sarah approaches, its tail twitching with nervous energy. "Hey there," she says, her voice gentle from disuse. "You're having a rough time too, huh?" The cat watches her warily, its eyes reflecting a familiar desperation that Sarah recognizes all too well. Without hesitation, she reaches into her pocket and pulls out half a sandwich, her only meal for the day, carefully wrapped in a napkin she'd collected from a kind barista who occasionally slipped her coffee. "Here you go," she says softly, placing the food before the starving creature. "I know what it's like to be hungry." She settles back on her heels, giving the cat space as it cautiously approaches the offering. As the cat eagerly devours the sandwich, Sarah feels a strange warmth spread through her chest. She watches the small animal eat, its whiskers twitching, and something shifts within her. For the first time in months, she feels a spark of purpose ignite in her heart, a reminder that she still has something to give, that her existence still matters in this vast, indifferent city. The cat finishes eating and looks up at her, blinking slowly. Sarah extends her hand, expecting the creature to flee, but instead, it tentatively moves closer, allowing her to stroke its head. The simple connection, This moment of trust between two struggling souls brings tears to Sarah's eyes. "We're quite the pair, aren't we?" she murmurs, a fragile smile forming on her chapped lips. But Sarah has no idea that this simple act of kindness, this sacrifice made despite her own desperate circumstances, has set wheels in motion that will completely transform her shattered existence. As the cat purrs beneath her gentle touch, the universe takes notice of a woman who, despite having nearly nothing, still found it within herself to share. And sometimes, it's these quiet moments of compassion that echo the loudest across the tapestry of fate. In the days that followed Sarah's encounter with the small cat, her life began to change in ways she had never imagined. The little creature, which she affectionately named Whiskers, became her constant companion, following her through the streets and alleys like a loyal shadow. As they roamed together, Sarah discovered a renewed sense of purpose. Whiskers was not just a pet. He was a reminder that even in the darkest corners of life, there could be light and companionship. Sarah felt a connection with Whiskers that transcended words. Each morning, they would wake up together in a makeshift shelter of cardboard and tattered blankets tucked away in a hidden corner of the park. The sun would rise slowly, casting a warm glow over the city, and with it came the sounds of life awakening. Birds chirping, people starting their daily routines, and the distant hum of traffic. As dawn broke, Sarah would share her meager breakfast with him, a morsel of bread or a scrap of food she managed to scrounge. Whiskers, in turn, would curl up in her lap, providing warmth during the chilly mornings, his soft purring filling the silence. With Whiskers by her side, Sarah felt the weight of her loneliness lift, if only slightly. They became a team, navigating the city together. Whiskers would often draw attention from passers-by, softening their gazes as they noticed the bond between the woman and her cat. Some people even stopped to offer food or spare change, their hearts warmed by the sight of the two unlikely friends. One afternoon, as they wandered through a bustling market, Sarah felt a flicker of hope. The market was alive with vibrant colors, enticing scents, and laughter. She watched as vendors called out to potential customers, selling everything from fresh produce to handmade crafts. The atmosphere buzzed with energy, a stark contrast to the quiet isolation she had grown accustomed to. Whiskers, ever curious, sniffed at various stalls, his little nose twitching as he explored. But it wasn't just the kindness of strangers that began to shift. Sarah found herself inspired to seek out more opportunities to help others, just as she had helped Whiskers. One day, while resting on a bench, she noticed a group of children playing nearby. They giggled and chased each other, their laughter ringing through the air like music. Sarah felt a pang of longing as she watched them, remembering her own childhood filled with joy and carefree adventures. The innocence reflected in their faces resonated deeply within her, tugging at the remnants of her lost hopes and dreams. On a whim, she approached the children, Whiskers trailing behind her. "Hi there. Would you like to meet my friend?" she asked, kneeling down. The children, intrigued by the sight of the scruffy cat, gathered around her, their eyes wide with excitement. As they took turns petting Whiskers, Sarah felt a strange warmth spread through her heart. Their innocent joy reminded her of the beauty still present in the world, even amidst her struggles. She shared stories about Whiskers' adventures, embellishing them with playful exaggerations that made the children giggle. For those precious moments, she was not a homeless woman. She was a storyteller, a source of joy, and she reveled in it. However, the reality of her situation loomed like a dark cloud overhead. Each night, as she lay on her makeshift bed, The harshness of her life would creep back in, reminding her of the challenges she faced. The uncertainty of where they would sleep the next night, the constant search for food, and the fear of being shooed away or worse weighed heavily on her. But with Whisker's comforting presence, she found strength to face another day. One chilly evening, as they huddled together under a thin blanket, Sarah realized that their bond had grown deeper than mere companionship. Whiskers had become her lifeline, a spark of hope that kept her going. She looked down at him, his little body warm against hers, and thought about how their lives had intertwined in such a profound way. But she also knew that her situation couldn't remain the same forever. She longed for stability, for a place to call home, and for a life where she could thrive rather than merely survive. As the city lights twinkled above them, Sarah made a silent promise to herself and to Whiskers. She would find a way to turn their lives around. With newfound determination, she began to explore local shelters and community organizations, seeking assistance and resources that could help them both. She would visit the library during the day, where the warmth of the building enveloped her, and she could access the internet to search for shelters or job opportunities. The librarians, noticing her frequent visits, offered her kindness, encouraging her to reach out for help. Little did she know that her journey was just beginning and that the universe was conspiring to bring forth opportunities that would change their lives forever. One day, while researching local assistance programs, she stumbled upon a flyer for a community center offering job training and employment assistance. The thought of getting back on her feet filled her with a mix of excitement and fear. Could she really do it? Could she find a job and eventually a stable place to live? With Whiskers by her side, she decided to take that first step. It was time to reclaim her life, not just for herself, but for her faithful companion, who had shown her that even in despair, there was still room for love and hope. And so, with a heart full of determination and a newfound sense of purpose, Sarah set out to change her life, ready to embrace whatever challenges lay ahead. As she looked down at Whiskers, who seemed to sense her resolve, she knew that together, they could face anything the world threw at them. Their journey was just beginning, and she was ready to move forward, step by step, toward a brighter future. Sarah's first visit to the community center was both terrifying and exhilarating. She stood outside the building for nearly 20 minutes, gathering the courage to walk through the doors. Whiskers sat patiently beside her, his amber eyes looking up at her as if to say, "You can do this." Taking a deep breath, Sarah pushed open the heavy glass doors and stepped inside, leaving behind the uncertainty of the streets, at least for now. The interior of the community center was warm and welcoming, a stark contrast to the cold, indifferent streets she had grown accustomed to. Soft lighting illuminated the hallways, and the walls were adorned with colorful posters advertising various programs and services. A friendly receptionist at the front desk looked up and smiled warmly. "Welcome. How can I help you today?" she asked, her voice genuine and kind. Sarah noticed the genuine warmth in her eyes, the kind of warmth that comes from someone who truly cares about helping others. Sarah hesitated for a moment, unsure of how to begin. The words felt stuck in her throat, as if speaking them aloud would make her vulnerabilities too real. I'm looking for help. Job training, maybe. I've had a rough time, and I'd like to get back on my feet," she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. The receptionist's smile never wavered, and she reached across the desk to gently pat Sarah's hand. "You've come to the right place. Let me connect you with our employment counselor, Marcus. He's wonderful and has helped many people in situations similar to yours. You're not alone in this. Within minutes, Sarah found herself sitting across from Marcus in a small, comfortable office decorated with plants and motivational quotes. A middle-aged man with kind eyes and an air of genuine compassion, Marcus gestured for her to sit down and make herself comfortable. He listened intently as she shared her story, the job loss that had seemed like the end of the world, the downward spiral that followed, and how she had ended up homeless on the unforgiving streets. He didn't judge her. Instead, he nodded thoughtfully and took careful notes, occasionally asking clarifying questions that showed he was truly engaged in her narrative. Sarah, I want you to know that what you're experiencing is not a reflection of your worth as a person. Many talented individuals face setbacks in their lives. The fact that you're here, seeking help and willing to work toward change, shows tremendous strength and resilience, Marcus said, his words like a balm to her wounded spirit. He then outlined a comprehensive plan tailored to her needs, including resume building, interview preparation, and skill development workshops. Over the following weeks, Sarah became a regular fixture at the community center. She attended job training sessions held in bright, modern classrooms where she learned new skills ranging from computer literacy to customer service excellence. She spent hours updating her resume with Marcus's guidance, crafting a narrative that highlighted her strengths rather than dwelling on her struggles. The instructors were patient and encouraging, helping her build confidence in her abilities with every passing day. During these sessions, Whiskers would wait in a designated pet-friendly area, cared for by volunteers who had grown fond of the little cat and often brought him treats and toys. Sarah appreciated this gesture immensely. It meant she didn't have to worry about leaving him alone on the streets, vulnerable and frightened. One afternoon, while attending a workshop on interview skills and professional communication, Sarah met another woman named Jennifer. Jennifer had also experienced the depths of homelessness and was now working part-time at a local nonprofit organization dedicated to helping at-risk youth. They struck up a conversation during the break, and Jennifer's story resonated deeply with Sarah. It's not easy, and there are days when I still struggle with the memories and the trauma. Jennifer confessed openly, her voice carrying the weight of her past experiences. But having a goal and working toward it makes all the difference. And having someone or something to care for, like your Whiskers, that gives you a reason to keep pushing forward even on the darkest days. The two women became friends, meeting for coffee at a nearby cafe where they would discuss their progress and share their fears and hopes for the future. Jennifer became an invaluable source of support, advice, and encouragement. She helped Sarah navigate the complexities of the social services system, connecting her with resources she didn't know existed. Through Jennifer's connections and advocacy, Sarah learned about a transitional housing program designed specifically for individuals working to rebuild their lives. The program offered affordable housing for up to 2 years while residents worked toward financial independence and stability. With additional support services including counseling, financial literacy training, and job placement assistance. Sarah's heart soared at the prospect of such comprehensive support. A real bed, a roof over her head, a safe place for Whiskers, and professional guidance. It seemed almost too good to be true. She submitted her application with trembling hands, pouring her heart into every response, explaining her situation with honesty and vulnerability. The application process took several weeks, during which Sarah continued her training and volunteered at the community center, gaining experience and building her resume. After a thorough interview process with the housing program's intake coordinator, Sarah received the news on a gray Tuesday morning. She had been accepted into the program. The letter, printed on official letterhead, confirmed that a studio apartment was waiting for her. The day she received the acceptance letter, Sarah sat down on a park bench, the same bench where she and Whiskers had spent countless nights, and wept. Tears of relief, joy, gratitude, and hope streamed down her face as she held the letter to her chest. Whiskers, sensing her emotional release, rubbed against her legs and purred softly, as if celebrating alongside her. Within a month, Sarah and Whiskers moved into a small but comfortable studio apartment in the transitional housing complex located in a quieter neighborhood away from the downtown chaos. The room was modest. A bed with fresh linens, a small kitchenette with basic appliances, a private bathroom with hot running water. But to Sarah, it was a palace beyond her wildest dreams. She stood in the middle of the room, slowly turning in a circle, hardly believing that this was real. The walls were painted a soft cream color, and sunlight streamed through a window that overlooked a small courtyard with trees and benches. Whiskers explored every corner of the space with meticulous attention, his tail held high, as if he too understood the profound significance of this moment in their lives. That evening, as darkness fell outside, Sarah sat on her new bed, with Whiskers curled up beside her. She thought back to that day in the alley, when she had given him her only meal, sacrificing her own hunger to ease his suffering. She thought about how that single act of kindness had set off a chain reaction that had transformed both their lives in ways she could never have anticipated. She reflected on the people who had helped her along the way. The kind barista, the librarians, Marcus, Jennifer, and countless volunteers. As she stroked his soft fur, she whispered, "We did it, buddy. We actually did it. We're going to be okay." But Sarah knew that her journey was far from over. She still needed to find stable employment that would provide sufficient income to eventually move into permanent housing. She needed to rebuild her savings, establish credit, and prove to herself and to the world that she could sustain this newfound stability. The road ahead would be challenging, filled with obstacles and uncertainties that she couldn't yet foresee. However, with Whiskers by her side, the support of friends like Jennifer, the mentorship of Marcus, and the resources provided by the community center and the transitional housing program, Sarah felt equipped to face whatever came next. As the sun set outside her window, casting a golden glow across the small room and illuminating dust motes that danced in the light, Sarah allowed herself to feel something she hadn't felt in a long time. Genuine, substantive hope. Not the fragile, desperate hope of mere survival that had sustained her through the darkest days, but a genuine, grounded hope, built on concrete steps and real progress. She had taken the first real step toward reclaiming her life, and there was no turning back now. The future, while uncertain, held promise and possibility, and that was enough. 6 months into her full-time position at the Housing First Initiative, Sarah stood in the doorway of a modest one-bedroom apartment in a quiet neighborhood, holding the keys in her trembling hands. The apartment was hers, not a transitional housing unit provided by a program, but a permanent home that she had secured through her own efforts and financial stability. The realization of this achievement was almost overwhelming. The apartment was located on the second floor of a well-maintained building with a small courtyard and landscaped gardens. Sunlight streamed through the windows, illuminating hardwood floors and freshly painted walls in a soft sage green. There was a small kitchen with updated appliances, a comfortable living room with space for a dining area, a bedroom with a walk-in closet, and a full bathroom with modern fixtures. It was modest compared to many homes, but to Sarah, it represented everything she had fought for. security, stability, and a place where she and Whiskers could truly belong. The moving day was bittersweet. Sarah packed her few possessions from the transitional housing apartment into boxes with the help of Jennifer and Marcus, who had both become dear friends. As they carried the boxes down the stairs, Sarah felt a profound gratitude for the program that had saved her life. The transitional housing had been a bridge between desperation and stability, and she would forever be indebted to the organization and its staff. "You did this, Sarah," Marcus said as they loaded the final box into Jennifer's car. "You made the decision to seek help, you put in the work, and you followed through. This apartment is a testament to your strength and determination." Sarah hugged him tightly, unable to find words adequate enough to express her gratitude. She had come so far from the woman who had sat on park benches, unsure if she would survive the night. That woman felt like a different person now, though Sarah carried her memories and her lessons with her always. Setting up the new apartment was a joyful process. Sarah had saved enough money to purchase some basic furniture: a bed frame with a real mattress, a small sofa, a dining table with 2 chairs, and a bookshelf. She shopped carefully, choosing items that were both affordable and durable. For the first time in years, she was thinking about the future, planning for longevity rather than mere survival. Whiskers explored the new apartment with curiosity, sniffing every corner and claiming various spots as his own. He seemed to understand that this was a significant change, and he settled into the space with the ease of a cat who knew he was home. Sarah set up a cozy corner for him with his bed, toys, and a window perch where he could watch the birds in the courtyard below. On her first night in the apartment, Sarah sat on her new sofa with Whiskers curled up beside her. She looked around at the space she had created. Modest, yes, but filled with the warmth of genuine comfort and safety. She thought about the journey that had brought her here: the job loss, the despair, the homeless nights, the chance encounter with Whiskers, and the series of kind people who had helped her along the way. Each moment, each struggle, had led her to this point. Her work at the Housing First initiative had become increasingly fulfilling. As a full-time administrative coordinator, Sarah had expanded her responsibilities and had begun to mentor new staff members. She understood the systemic issues that contributed to homelessness and was passionate about advocating for policy changes that could help more people. She had even begun attending evening classes at a local community college, working toward a degree in social work. Her dream was to eventually become a case manager or counselor, using her lived experience to help others navigate their own journeys toward stability. One afternoon at work, Rebecca approached Sarah with an exciting opportunity. "Sarah, we're launching a new peer support program for our clients who are transitioning from homelessness to stable housing. We're looking for someone to coordinate and lead this program, someone who understands the experience firsthand and can genuinely connect with our clients. I immediately thought of you. Would you be interested?" Sarah's eyes widened with excitement and trepidation. The position would be a significant step up in responsibility and would require her to share her own story publicly, something she had been hesitant to do. But she also recognized this as an opportunity to make a deeper impact, to use her experience to help others in ways that went beyond administrative tasks. "I'm interested," Sarah said, her voice steady despite her nervousness. "But I want to be honest about my concerns. Sharing my story publicly, being vulnerable in front of clients, it's frightening. What if people judge me? What if they don't see me as a professional because of my past?" Rebecca leaned forward, her expression serious and compassionate. "Sarah, your past is not a liability. It's your greatest asset in this role. You've lived through what our clients are experiencing. You understand their fears, their shame, their hope. Yes, some people might judge you, but most will see you as proof that recovery and stability are possible. Your story is powerful, and it has the potential to inspire and motivate people who need to hear it. Over the following weeks, Sarah prepared to launch the peer support program. She developed curricula focused on practical skills like budgeting, job searching, and navigating social services. But more importantly, she created a space where people could share their stories, celebrate their victories, and support one another through their challenges. She decided to begin by sharing her own story, setting the tone for vulnerability and authenticity. The first peer support group meeting was held on a Thursday evening in a comfortable room at the organization's office. About 15 people attended. Individuals who had recently transitioned from homelessness to stable housing. Sarah stood at the front of the room, her heart pounding, and took a deep breath. "My name is Sarah, and I'm a person with lived experience of homelessness," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "For 3 years, I lived on the streets of this city. I lost my job, my apartment, my sense of self-worth. I spent nights wondering if I would survive until morning. But I also met people who believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. And I found a reason to keep fighting. A small orange cat named Whiskers." As she told her story, Sarah watched the faces of the people in the room. She saw recognition in their eyes, understanding, and hope. When she finished, there was a moment of silence, and then a woman in the back raised her hand. "Thank you for sharing that," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I thought I was the only one who felt this way. Hearing that you made it through gives me hope." Over the following months, the peer support program became a vital resource for the organization's clients. Sarah facilitated weekly meetings where people shared their experiences, celebrated milestones, and supported one another through setbacks. She began to see the transformative power of connection and community, and she realized that her role extended far beyond administrative coordination. She was becoming a beacon of hope for people who desperately needed to know that recovery was possible. Sarah's personal life also flourished during this period. She developed friendships with colleagues, attended social events, and even joined a book club that met monthly at a local library. She reconnected with her family, who had been estranged during her years of homelessness. Her parents, initially shocked and saddened by what she had endured, eventually came to understand the circumstances that had led to her homelessness and were immensely proud of her recovery and achievements. One Sunday afternoon, Sarah's parents visited her apartment for the first time. Her mother walked through the rooms, touching the walls and furniture as if confirming that it was real. "Oh, Sarah," her mother said, embracing her tightly. "I'm so proud of you. Look at what you've accomplished." Her father sat on the sofa, Whiskers immediately jumping into his lap. "This little guy saved your life," he said, stroking Whiskers' fur. "We owe him a debt of gratitude." Sarah smiled, watching her father and Whiskers bond. "He saved me, and I saved him. We saved each other." A year after moving into her apartment, Sarah received her associate degree in social work from the community college. She had maintained excellent grades while working full-time and managing the peer support program. The graduation ceremony was a proud moment, with Jennifer, Marcus, Rebecca, and her parents all in attendance, cheering as she walked across the stage to receive her diploma. Following her graduation, Sarah was promoted to the position of peer support program manager, with a significant salary increase and expanded responsibilities. She now supervised a small team of peer support specialists, many of whom had their own lived experience of homelessness. Together, they were creating a comprehensive support network that helped dozens of people transition from homelessness to stable, fulfilling lives. Sarah's apartment had become a home in the truest sense. The walls were decorated with photographs from her life. Pictures of her with Whiskers, with Jennifer and Marcus, with her family, and with clients from the peer support program. She had a bookshelf filled with books on social work, psychology, and personal development. Her kitchen was well stocked with ingredients for the meals she loved to cook. Whiskers had become a fixture in the neighborhood, often seen lounging on the apartment balcony, greeting neighbors as they passed. One evening, as Sarah sat at her dining table working on a grant proposal for the organization, she paused and looked around her apartment. She thought about the woman she had been, desperate, hopeless, and alone on the streets. That woman seemed so far away now. Yet Sarah carried her with her always, in her empathy, her determination, and her commitment to helping others. She pulled out her journal and began to write. Today marks 1 year since I moved into this apartment. 1 year of stability, growth, and purpose. I have a job I love, a home I'm proud of, friends who support me, and a mission that gives my life meaning. But more than that, I have proof that change is possible, that recovery is achievable, and that no one is beyond redemption. Whiskers and I have come so far, and I know that our journey is far from over. There are still challenges ahead, still mountains to climb. But I face them with hope, determination, and the knowledge that I am not alone. I am grateful for every moment, every person who helped me, and every opportunity to make a difference in someone else's life. As Sarah closed her journal, Whiskers jumped onto her lap, purring contentedly. She scratched behind his ears and smiled. They had built a life together, a real, meaningful life filled with purpose and connection. And the best part was knowing that their story could inspire others to believe that transformation was possible, that no matter how dark the night, dawn would eventually come. 2 years after Sarah had secured her permanent apartment, the Housing First Initiative was preparing to host its annual gala, a fundraising event designed to raise awareness and resources for their homelessness prevention and housing programs. Rebecca approached Sarah with an unusual request during a staff meeting. "Sarah, we'd like you to be one of our keynote speakers at the gala," Rebecca announced to the room. "Your story, your journey, and your current work with the peer support program embody everything our organization stands for. We believe your voice could inspire donors and community members to support our mission." Sarah felt her stomach tighten with anxiety. Public speaking had never been her comfort zone, and the thought of sharing her story with a room full of strangers, many of them wealthy donors, made her nervous. But she also recognized the opportunity to amplify the voices of the people she served, to shed light on the systemic issues surrounding homelessness, and to potentially secure funding that could help more people like herself. "I'll do it," Sarah said, her voice steady despite her internal anxiety. "But I want to make sure my message is authentic. I don't want to tell a sanitized version of my story just to make people feel comfortable. I want them to understand the reality of homelessness and the importance of comprehensive support systems." Rebecca smiled warmly. "That's exactly why we want you to speak, Sarah. Your authenticity is your greatest strength." Over the following weeks, Sarah worked with a communications consultant provided by the organization to craft her speech. She wanted to strike a balance between sharing the difficult realities of her experience and offering hope and inspiration. She wrote and rewrote her speech multiple times, each iteration becoming more powerful and compelling. The night of the gala arrived, and Sarah dressed carefully in a professional, black dress that Jennifer had helped her select. She looked at herself in the mirror. The woman staring back was confident, poised, and ready. Whiskers, sensing her nervous energy, rubbed against her legs in support. She bent down to stroke his fur. "Wish me luck, buddy," she whispered. The gala was held in an elegant ballroom downtown, with tables decorated with fresh flowers and candlelight. Approximately 300 people attended: donors, community leaders, nonprofit professionals, and volunteers. Sarah sat at a table near the front with Rebecca, her parents, Jennifer, and Marcus. As she looked around the room, she felt a mixture of excitement and trepidation. After dinner, Rebecca took the stage to welcome the guests and provide an overview of the organization's work over the past year. She highlighted the number of people housed, the success rates of their programs, and the expansion of their peer support initiatives. Then she introduced Sarah. "Tonight, I'd like to introduce you to Sarah Martinez, our peer support program manager." Sarah came to our organization 2 years ago as someone with lived experience of homelessness. Today, she leads our most impactful program and serves as an inspiration to everyone who works with her. Please welcome Sarah to the stage. Sarah stood, her legs slightly unsteady, and made her way to the stage. She took a deep breath, gripped the sides of the podium, and looked out at the sea of faces. She began to speak. "Good evening. My name is Sarah Martinez, and I am a person with lived experience of homelessness. For 3 years, I lived on the streets of this city. I want to tell you my story, not because it's unique, but because it's tragically common. And I want to tell you about the people and systems that saved my life, because I believe that understanding these factors is crucial to addressing homelessness in our community. I didn't become homeless because I was lazy or irresponsible. I became homeless because I lost my job during an economic downturn, and I didn't have a safety net, no family nearby, no substantial savings, no access to affordable housing. Within 6 months, I went from having an apartment and a career to sleeping on park benches. And I wasn't alone. The homeless population in our city is diverse. It includes families with children, elderly individuals, people with mental health challenges, and working people who simply cannot afford housing in our current market. During my time on the streets, I met a small orange cat named Whiskers. I gave him my only meal that day, and in doing so, I found a reason to keep fighting. Whiskers became my purpose, my anchor, and my greatest teacher. He taught me that even in the darkest circumstances, there is room for love and connection. But a cat, no matter how beloved, cannot solve the systemic issues that lead to homelessness. What saved my life was access to comprehensive support systems. It was a community center that provided job, training, and counseling. It was a transitional housing program that offered affordable housing while I rebuilt my life. It was people like Marcus, my employment counselor, and Jennifer, a friend who had also experienced homelessness and understood my struggles. And it was organizations like the Housing First Initiative, which believed that everyone deserves a safe place to call home. Today, I have an apartment, a job I love, and a purpose. I use my experience to help others navigate their own journeys toward stability. But I want to be clear. My success is not just a result of my individual effort. It's a result of a community that chose to invest in me, that believed in my potential, and that provided concrete resources and support. Many people believe that homelessness is an individual problem with individual solutions. But the reality is that homelessness is a systemic issue that requires systemic solutions. We need affordable housing. We need mental health services and addiction treatment. We need job training and employment support. We need people who understand and empathize with the experience of homelessness. And we need organizations like the Housing First Initiative that are committed to addressing these issues comprehensively. I stand before you tonight as proof that change is possible. But I also stand before you as a representative of thousands of people in our city who are still struggling, who are still living on the streets, who are still hoping for someone to believe in them. The work that this organization does matters. It saves lives, it transforms communities, and it requires your support. I ask you tonight to consider how you can contribute to this mission. Whether through financial donations, volunteer work, or simply spreading awareness, your involvement can make a real difference in someone's life. You can be the person who believes in someone when they don't believe in themselves. You can be part of a community that chooses compassion over judgment, support over stigma. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for caring about the people in our community who are struggling. And thank you for your commitment to creating a world where everyone has a safe place to call home. As Sarah finished her speech and stepped away from the podium, the room erupted in applause. She saw tears in many eyes, including her mother's. As she returned to her seat, people reached out to touch her arm, to thank her, to share their own stories of connection to homelessness. The gala was a tremendous success, raising more than double the organization's fundraising goal. More importantly, Sarah's speech generated significant media attention. Local news outlets covered her story, and she was invited to speak at community forums, schools, and other nonprofit organizations. Her message of hope and the importance of systemic support resonated with people across the city. Following the gala, Sarah's role at the organization expanded even further. She was asked to serve on the organization's board of directors, becoming one of the few individuals with lived experience to hold such a position. She also began consulting with other nonprofits on how to effectively incorporate peer support and lived experience into their programs. But with these expanded responsibilities came new challenges. Sarah found herself working longer hours, attending evening meetings, and taking on projects that stretched her capacity. She began to feel the weight of carrying not just her own recovery, but also the responsibility of representing all people with lived experience of homelessness. Some nights, she would come home exhausted, questioning whether she was doing enough, whether her efforts were making a real difference. One evening, after a particularly draining day, Sarah sat on her apartment balcony with whiskers, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. She thought about the woman she had been on the streets, the woman who had simply wanted to survive one more day. That woman would have been amazed by everything Sarah had accomplished. But she also would have recognized the danger of burnout, the importance of self-care, and the need to maintain boundaries. Sarah made a decision that night. She would continue her work with the Housing First Initiative, but she would also prioritize her own well-being. She would maintain regular therapy sessions to process her experiences and manage the secondary trauma that came from working closely with people still experiencing homelessness. She would set boundaries around her work hours and protect time for rest and personal relationships. And she would remember that her value was not determined by how much she accomplished, but by who she was as a person. This decision proved to be transformative. By taking care of herself, Sarah became more effective in her work. She was more present, more patient, and more creative in her problem solving. Her team noticed the change and responded positively. The peer support program expanded to serve more people, and the outcomes improved significantly. 3 years after moving into her permanent apartment, Sarah decided to take on one more significant project. She began writing a memoir about her experience of homelessness and her journey toward recovery. She wanted to create a resource that could help others, both people experiencing homelessness and those working to support them, understand the complexity of homelessness and the importance of comprehensive support systems. Writing the memoir was both cathartic and challenging. It required Sarah to revisit painful memories, to examine her own role in her circumstances, and to reflect on the people and systems that had helped her survive and thrive. She wrote about the shame she had felt, the discrimination she had experienced, the small acts of kindness that had sustained her, and the larger systemic changes that were necessary to address homelessness comprehensively. As she wrote, Sarah realized that her story was not unique in its struggles, but it was unique in its outcome. She had been fortunate enough to access the support system she needed, to meet people who believed in her, and to have the internal resilience to keep fighting. Not everyone had these advantages, and she wanted her memoir to highlight this inequality and advocate for systemic change. 2 years later, Sarah's memoir was published by a small, independent press. The book, titled From the Streets, A Journey Toward Home, received positive reviews and began to circulate in academic and nonprofit circles. It was adopted as a required reading in several university courses on social work and homelessness. More importantly, it resonated with people who had experienced homelessness or who worked in the field. Sarah began giving readings and book signings at bookstores, libraries, and community centers across the city and beyond. At these events, she would meet people whose lives had been touched by homelessness, individuals who had experienced it themselves, family members of people experiencing homelessness, and professionals working in the field. Their stories, their gratitude, and their shared commitment to addressing homelessness reinforced Sarah's sense of purpose. One evening, at a book signing in a downtown bookstore, a young woman approached Sarah with a copy of the memoir. She was thin, with tired eyes, and Sarah immediately recognized the signs of someone struggling with homelessness or recent housing instability. "I just wanted to thank you," the young woman said, her voice trembling. "I read your book, and it gave me hope. I'm currently in a transitional housing program, and I'm working on getting back on my feet. Your story shows me that it's possible, that I can have a real life again." Sarah took the young woman's hand. "You can," she said firmly, "and you will. What you're doing right now, seeking help, working toward stability, that takes courage. Keep going, and remember, you're not alone." As the young woman left with her signed copy of the memoir, Sarah felt a profound sense of fulfillment. This was why she did the work she did, not for recognition or accolades, but for moments like these, when she could offer hope to someone who desperately needed it. That night, as Sarah returned to her apartment, she thought about how far she had come. She had a stable job, a home, meaningful relationships, and a platform to advocate for systemic change. But more than that, she had a sense of purpose and a deep understanding of her own resilience and capacity for growth. She sat at her dining table with whiskers curled up beside her, and she opened her journal to write a reflection on her journey. "Today, someone told me that my book gave them hope. I realized in that moment that my story is not just mine anymore. It belongs to everyone who has struggled, everyone who has felt hopeless, everyone who needs to know that transformation is possible. Whiskers and I have come so far, and while we still face challenges, we do so with the knowledge that we are part of a larger community working toward a world where everyone has a safe place to call home. This is my purpose, and I am grateful for every opportunity to fulfill it. 5 years after Sarah had first moved into her permanent apartment, the Housing First initiative decided to expand its operations significantly. The organization had secured substantial grant funding and was planning to open a new comprehensive resource center that would serve as a hub for homeless individuals and families seeking services. Rebecca approached Sarah with an exciting opportunity. "Sarah, we want you to be the director of the new resource center," Rebecca said during a private meeting in her office. "You've grown so much over the past 5 years. Your leadership of the peer support program has been exemplary. Your memoir has become a powerful advocacy tool, and your board service has been invaluable. We believe you're the right person to lead this new initiative." Sarah was taken aback by the offer. The position would represent a significant step up in responsibility and would require her to manage a larger team, oversee multiple programs, and represent the organization in high-level community and government meetings. It was both an incredible opportunity and a daunting challenge. "I'm honored by the offer," Sarah said thoughtfully, "but I want to be honest about my concerns. This is a big step, and I want to make sure I'm ready. Can I take some time to think about it and perhaps speak with a mentor about the decision?" Rebecca smiled knowingly. "Of course. Take the time you need. But Sarah, I want you to know that I have complete confidence in your ability to do this job. You've earned it through your dedication, your integrity, and your genuine commitment to our mission." Over the following week, Sarah met with Marcus, who had become her trusted advisor and friend over the years. They sat at their favorite coffee shop, the same one where she had sat years ago, wondering if she would survive another day. "This is a big decision," Marcus said, stirring his coffee thoughtfully. "But I think you already know what you want to do. The question is whether you're ready to take on this level of responsibility." "I'm scared," Sarah admitted. "I'm scared of failing, of letting people down, of not being qualified enough. I'm scared that my past will somehow undermine my credibility as a leader." Marcus leaned forward, his expression serious. "Sarah, your past is not a liability. It's your greatest asset. You understand the systemic issues surrounding homelessness in a way that few people do. You have the lived experience that gives you credibility with clients, and you have the professional skills and education that allow you to manage complex operations. Your fear is natural, but it shouldn't stop you from pursuing this opportunity." After much reflection and discussion with her support network, Sarah accepted the position of director of the new resource center. The position came with a significant salary increase, expanded benefits, and the opportunity to shape the vision and operations of a major initiative. The next 6 months were consumed with planning and preparation. Sarah worked with architects, program specialists, and community members to design a resource center that would be welcoming, accessible, and comprehensive. She wanted the space to reflect the dignity of the people who would use it, not a sterile, institutional environment, but a warm, human-centered space that offered real hope and support. The resource center was designed to include multiple service areas, a reception and intake area where people could access information about available services, a job training and employment center with computers and career counseling, a health clinic providing basic medical services and mental health counseling, a children's area for families with kids, a shower and laundry facility, a small library with computers and educational resources, and a peer support meeting space where people could connect with others and share their experiences. Sarah was particularly passionate about ensuring that the resource center reflected the voices and needs of the people it would serve. She conducted extensive community listening sessions with currently and formerly homeless individuals, asking them what services they needed, what barriers they faced, and what would make them feel welcome and respected at the center. One conversation particularly stuck with Sarah. An older man named Robert, who had been homeless for 7 years, shared his perspective. A lot of places treat us like we're broken things that need to be fixed. But we're not broken. We're people who have faced extraordinary circumstances. If you want to create a place where people like me will come, treat us with respect, listen to us, don't judge us, and give us real opportunities to improve our situations, not just temporary band-aids. Sarah took Robert's words to heart and ensured that his perspective was woven throughout the design and operations of the Resource Center. She created a client advisory board composed of people with lived experience of homelessness who would provide ongoing input on the center's programs and policies. When the Resource Center officially opened on a cold February morning, the energy was palpable. The ribbon-cutting ceremony was attended by city officials, nonprofit leaders, community members, and dozens of people experiencing homelessness who were eager to access the services. Sarah stood at the entrance, greeting people as they came in, her heart full with the knowledge that this space would serve as a lifeline for so many. The Resource Center quickly became a vital hub in the community. Within the first month, over 500 people had accessed services. The job training program was booked solid with people eager to develop new skills. The peer support groups were thriving, with multiple meetings happening daily on different topics: budgeting, mental health, parenting, recovery from substance abuse, and more. The health clinic was providing essential medical services to people who had limited access to health care while homeless. But Sarah also quickly learned that managing a large, complex organization came with significant challenges. Staff burnout was a constant concern, as the emotional labor of working with traumatized individuals took its toll on employees. Budget constraints meant that there was never enough funding to fully implement all the programs she envisioned. And despite the center's best efforts, not everyone who came through its doors experienced positive outcomes. Some people cycled back into homelessness, struggling with addiction or mental health issues that required more intensive treatment than the center could provide. One particularly difficult situation involved a young man named David, who had been a regular at the Resource Center for several months. Sarah had worked closely with David, helping him secure employment and transitional housing. But after a few months of stability, David relapsed into substance abuse and disappeared from the center. Weeks later, Sarah learned that David had died from an overdose on the streets. The news devastated Sarah. She had believed in David's potential, had invested time and energy in his recovery, and felt personally responsible for his death. She spiraled into a period of deep grief and self-doubt, questioning whether her work made any real difference. It was Jennifer who pulled her out of this dark place. Over dinner at Sarah's apartment, Jennifer listened as Sarah poured out her guilt and despair. "Sarah, I know you're hurting," Jennifer said gently. "But you can't blame yourself for David's choices. You provided him with resources, support, and hope. What happened to him was a tragedy. But it wasn't your fault. And you need to remember that for every David, there are dozens of people whose lives you've genuinely changed." "But what if I had done more?" Sarah asked, tears streaming down her face. "What if I had checked in more frequently or provided more intensive support? Then you would burn yourself out completely and be unable to help anyone," Jennifer replied firmly. "Sarah, you can't save everyone. What you can do is show up, do your best, and trust that your work matters. And it does. I've seen the impact you've had on this community. You've changed lives. You've given people hope. that's not nothing. Sarah's grief gradually transformed into renewed commitment. She implemented new protocols at the resource center to better identify and support individuals at high risk of overdose or suicide. She worked with the city to increase funding for intensive mental health and addiction treatment services. And she participated in a local advocacy campaign to increase access to harm reduction services, including needle exchange programs and medication-assisted treatment. This advocacy work brought Sarah into contact with city officials and policymakers. She testified before the city council about the realities of homelessness and the importance of comprehensive support systems. She met with the mayor to discuss strategies for addressing homelessness at a systemic level. And she collaborated with other nonprofit organizations to develop a coordinated response to the homelessness crisis. Her advocacy efforts began to have real impact. The city increased funding for mental health and addiction services. New affordable housing units were developed in partnership with the Housing First Initiative and other organizations. And a coordinated entry system was implemented to help homeless individuals access services more efficiently. But Sarah's work also attracted criticism and resistance. Some people argued that the city was being too generous to homeless individuals, that it was enabling dependency rather than promoting self-sufficiency. Others criticized the harm reduction approach, arguing that needle exchange and medication-assisted treatment were condoning drug use rather than addressing the root causes of addiction. Sarah found herself in the position of defending her work and her values repeatedly. She gave interviews to local media outlets, participated in community forums, and engaged in difficult conversations with people who disagreed with her approach. Through these interactions, she developed a thicker skin and a more sophisticated understanding of the political and social dynamics surrounding homelessness. 7 years after moving into her permanent apartment, Sarah was invited to speak at a national conference on homelessness and housing policy. The invitation came from a prestigious organization that brought together researchers, policymakers, nonprofit leaders, and advocates from across the country. Sarah would be part of a panel discussion on the role of lived experience in addressing homelessness. The conference was held in a major city, and Sarah traveled with Jennifer, who had taken time off work to support her friend. As they walked through the conference center, Sarah felt a mixture of excitement and imposter syndrome. She was surrounded by Pete's, renowned researchers, and high-level policymakers. Who was she to be speaking alongside these experts? But when she took the stage and began to speak, Sarah's doubts melted away. She talked about her experience of homelessness, the systemic factors that contributed to it, the people and programs that had helped her recover, and the importance of centering the voices and experiences of people with lived experience in policy discussions. She spoke with authority and passion, drawing on both her personal experience and her professional expertise. During the question and answer session, a prominent researcher asked Sarah a challenging question. Ms. Martinez, some argue that relying too heavily on the lived experience perspective can lead to policy recommendations that are emotionally driven rather than evidence-based. How do you respond to that criticism? Sarah took a moment to collect her thoughts before responding. That's a fair question, and I appreciate the opportunity to address it. I would argue that lived experience and evidence-based practice are not mutually exclusive. In fact, I believe they're complementary. Lived experience provides crucial insights into what actually works for people experiencing homelessness. Insights that might not emerge from traditional research methodologies. At the same time, we need rigorous data collection and analysis to understand the broader impacts of our interventions. The most effective approach combines both perspectives. Her answer was well received, and several audience members approached her afterward to continue the conversation. One woman, a housing policy researcher from a major university, was particularly interested in collaborating with Sarah on a research project examining the long-term outcomes of peer support programs for people transitioning from homelessness. "I think your work is groundbreaking," the researcher, Dr. Patricia Wong, said. "Would you be interested in collaborating on a study? We could collect data on the outcomes of your peer support program and publish our findings in peer-reviewed journals. This could have significant impact on how other organizations approach peer support." Sarah was intrigued by the opportunity. She had been thinking about how to expand the evidence base for peer support work, and this collaboration could be valuable. She and Dr. Wong exchanged contact information and began planning a research partnership. Over the following months, Sarah worked with Dr. Wong and her research team to design a rigorous study examining the outcomes of the peer support program at the Housing First initiative. They collected data on participants' housing stability, employment status, mental health, social connection, and overall well-being. They compared outcomes for people who participated in the peer support program with outcomes for people who received standard services without peer support. The results were striking. Participants in the peer support program had significantly better outcomes across nearly all measures. They were more likely to maintain stable housing, more likely to be employed, and reported higher levels of well-being and social connection. Perhaps most importantly, they reported feeling less alone and more hopeful about their futures. When the research was published in a peer-reviewed journal, it generated significant attention in the field. Other organizations began reaching out to the Housing First initiative, asking for guidance on how to implement peer support programs. Sarah found herself in the position of a thought leader and expert, consulted by organizations across the country seeking to improve their services. But despite all these external accomplishments and accolades, Sarah never lost sight of the personal relationships and individual connections that had always been at the heart of her work. She continued to spend time with clients at the Resource Center, listening to their stories, celebrating their victories, and providing support during their struggles. She maintained close friendships with Jennifer and Marcus, who had been instrumental in her own recovery. And she cherished her time with Whiskers, who was now an elderly cat, but still an active presence in her life and work. 8 years after moving into her permanent apartment, Sarah received a call that would prove to be both joyful and bittersweet. Marcus, her longtime mentor and friend, had decided to retire after 40 years of working in the nonprofit sector. He wanted to host a celebration of his career and invited Sarah to be one of the speakers. The event was held at the community center where Sarah had first sought help all those years ago. The room was filled with people whose lives Marcus had touched: former clients, colleagues, volunteers, and community members. When it was Sarah's turn to speak, she stood before the crowd and reflected on Marcus's impact on her life. "Marcus came into my life when I was at my lowest point," Sarah said, her voice thick with emotion. "I didn't believe in myself, didn't think I had anything to offer the world. But Marcus believed in me. He saw potential in me that I couldn't see in myself. He provided me with practical tools and support. But more importantly, he treated me with dignity and respect. He showed me that I was worthy of investment, worthy of hope, worthy of a better future. I know I'm not the only person in this room whose life Marcus has transformed. He has dedicated his career to helping people like us believe in ourselves and our potential. Marcus, I want you to know that your work matters. It has ripple effects that extend far beyond what you might ever know. Because of you, I was able to recover, to build a stable life, and to help hundreds of other people do the same. Your legacy is not just in the people you've directly helped, but in all the people those individuals have gone on to help. Thank you for everything you've done for me and for this community." As Sarah finished speaking, The entire room stood and applauded. Marcus came on stage and embraced Sarah, and there wasn't a dry eye in the room. It was a moment of profound gratitude and recognition of the interconnected nature of human support and transformation. That evening, as Sarah drove home through the quiet city streets, she reflected on how much her life had changed. She thought about the woman she had been, desperate, hopeless, sleeping on park benches. She thought about the turning points, meeting Whiskers, encountering the barista's kindness, finding the community center, meeting Marcus, securing employment, moving into her apartment. Each of these moments had seemed small at the time, but together they had created the trajectory of her life. She thought about the people she had helped along the way, the hundreds of individuals who had accessed services at the resource center, the peer support program, participants who had found hope and connection, the young woman at the book signing who had found inspiration in her memoir. She thought about the systemic changes she had advocated for, the policies she had influenced, the research she had contributed to that might help shape how society approached homelessness in the future. When Sarah arrived home, Whiskers was waiting for her at the door, meowing in greeting. She picked him up and held him close, stroking his soft fur. "We've come so far, buddy," she whispered. "We've built something real, something meaningful. And the best part is knowing that our journey has helped so many others find their own way home." She set Whiskers down and moved to her desk, where she opened her journal for the first time in several months. She began to write. "Today, I celebrated Marcus's retirement and reflected on how much my life has changed. 8 years ago, I was homeless and hopeless. Today, I am a director of a major resource center, a published author, a researcher, and an advocate for systemic change. But more importantly, I am a person who knows the value of human connection, the power of believing in someone's potential, and the importance of never giving up on yourself or others. I have learned that recovery is not linear. There are setbacks and struggles, moments of doubt and despair. But there are also moments of profound joy, unexpected victories, and the deep satisfaction of knowing that your work matters, that your life has meaning, and that you are part of something larger than yourself. As I look toward the future, I know there is still so much work to be done. Homelessness remains a crisis in our city and across the country. There are still people sleeping on the streets, still families struggling to find affordable housing, still individuals struggling with addiction and mental health issues. But I also know that change is possible, that with comprehensive support systems, with people who believe in others' potential, and with systemic policy changes, we can create a world where everyone has a safe place to call home. Whiskers and I have built a life together that I never thought possible. And now, I dedicate myself to helping others build their own lives, their own homes, their own futures. This is my purpose, and I am grateful for every opportunity to fulfill it." As Sarah closed her journal, she looked around her apartment, the home that had once seemed like an impossible dream. The walls were decorated with photographs and mementos from her journey. Her bookshelf held not just books on social work and policy, but also novels, poetry, and memoirs. Evidence of a life being lived, fully and intentionally. Her kitchen was warm and welcoming, filled with the aromas of the meals she loved to cook. And Whiskers, her constant companion, was curled up on the sofa, purring contentedly. Sarah smiled, knowing that while her journey had been long and difficult, it had led her to exactly where she was meant to be. And the most beautiful part was knowing that her story was not just her own. It belonged to every person who needed to know that transformation was possible, that recovery was achievable, and that no matter how dark the night, dawn would eventually come.